Von Fumetti. And as you know, every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific, I go live, giving you everything you need to add six figures of revenue to your bookkeeping business. And I'm really excited about today's episode because we are going to do a consultation role play. So I'm going to bring Holly on, and we're going to talk about consultations, and we're going to kind of live go over the types of questions we need to be asking so that you can see exactly how to conduct consultation so that you can close more clients and you can close them for higher fees. Okay, so that's what we're going to be talking about today. I am live on my YouTube channel, in my Facebook group, and on LinkedIn. So depending on what platform you're on, you're going to want to jump over to those other platforms, subscribe to YouTube, join my Facebook group, and connect with me on LinkedIn. The links are in the description because we've got lots of different content going out on different platforms, and I want to make sure that that you're getting what you need. Okay, and so we've got lots of great advice and discussion in lots of different locations. So make sure you do that. And also, we're live here, so I want people to learn from this. So you are more than welcome to type questions into the chat as we go, and we will answer those as we go. You can ask me, you can ask Holly. Holly's been doing this for a while now, so it's nice to hear different perspectives. So feel free to type questions into the chat. If you're watching this on the replay, do the same thing. Type your questions into the chat or the comments, and I'll get a notification. I'll come back and answer those. Okay. So without further ado, let's just meet Holly and bring Holly on. Hey there, Holly. How you doing?
Hi, good. How are you?
Good. Thank you. Appreciate you doing this for us. For everybody out there who doesn't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself and your bookkeeping business.
Sure. So I've been doing kind of in the accounting world for over 5 years, but I kind of wanted to start doing my own thing. So I've kind of done this twice. I started a bookkeeping business, and I found that I didn't have a ton of confidence when I was talking with potential prospects, and I couldn't just really get it off the ground, and I kind of gave up. And then like a year or two went by, and I had a lot of life happen in the meantime.
That
But then
happens.
I decided to start again just in March. I reopened up my business. And so I'm more confident now because I have, years more accounting experience. So that's definitely helped in my calls, but I'm still I'm looking to grow it. I have, one or two clients, but I would wanting to get better on my calls so I can, add more clients to my roster. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Perfect. So you are getting calls, leads are reaching out to you, but obviously you want to capitalize on those. You want to close a higher percentage of those. You want to obviously charge what you're worth as well.
Exactly.
Is that accurate? Okay. Very cool. So tell me, have you been on calls where you feel like, look, this is a great client. This is somebody who I'd love to have. There's really nothing standing in the way of us working together that didn't work out for whatever reason?
Yeah, from my perspective, it seemed like, there was a lot of things I could do to help. And, I've sent out proposals. I've sent out many proposals and, not really gotten a response or, something like that. But from my standpoint, they seem to be interested in it. And then I'd send the proposal and they're gone.
Yeah.
Never to be heard from again.
For the
So
people
yeah,
who,
I've definitely had that.
for the people who you send out a proposal to and they kind of ghost you, are those people who you gave like a fee or a range or an estimate on the initial call? Or was it more of like, hey, yeah, let me take a look at everything and I'll send you over a proposal with a number in it?
Yeah, it was more like the second one. I
Okay.
found there was a couple that when I gave, I did give a range, but it's most of the time I don't. But the ones I have, they still, same thing. They disappear.
Yeah. Yeah,
Hmm.
the giving the range on the call at least gives you a chance to see if you're on the same page, and if they have an issue with it, then you can handle it there on the call. If they say, "Oh, that's not what I was expecting," okay, well, let's talk about a little bit about what your expectations were. as opposed to like sending a proposal and it's like, and they've never heard of the price before. They get the proposal, they read it, it's too much. They don't even bother responding. So you really don't have a chance to talk. So that'd be one thing that I would encourage you to do, even though it may continue, like a certain percentage of those will still not turn out the way you want it to. That'll still happen, but it'll at least give us a fighting chance. So
For sure.
that's the first thing that I would encourage you to do, and that's something that comes with, as you do more calls. When I first started, I didn't give ranges. I didn't really know what I should be charging anyway. So it's kind of an evolution. You start doing some calls, and then you start on a call. You'll during the conversation, what I like to do is I like to just kind of drop people into one of three buckets, small, medium, large, just based on kind of what I'm feeling, even though I might not have seen the books yet. But based on that conversation, I might say, okay, that's a small client. That, you're probably in the, $500 to $1,000 range. Or maybe they're a medium client, 1,000 to 2,000, or maybe they're a large client. And I'll just kind of use that, but that'll at least help me determine whether or not we're on the same page. And if they've got an issue, let's address it there instead of me going off and putting into, a bunch of work into writing a proposal that may not work out for either party.
Yeah.
I don't want to see you spend any time writing proposals because we don't get paid to write proposals. In fact, as you get more comfortable and confident doing calls, it's like, okay, here's the range. Is that something that makes sense for you? Yeah, sure. Send me a proposal. Okay. I just want to reiterate, if I send you over a proposal tomorrow with this number on it, that's something you're prepared to move forward with. So that comment right there is, not something I would have done as I was starting out, but I wanted to make it very clear that there's work that goes into this proposal. Like, are we on the same page? I don't want to spend my time. I don't want to spend your time having to review a proposal that doesn't work for either of us. So if I can get that second yes, yeah, that range works for us. And yes, if I saw a proposal with that number on it, I'd be prepared to move forward. That really goes a long way towards fostering that relationship. And then the last thing I would recommend before we just jump into asking questions on a consultation role play is setting up a time for a follow-up phone call. Are you doing any of that?
I don't. No, I don't.
Yeah. If you do that, you stand a really good chance of them not ghosting you because they've got a call on their calendar. So at the end of the consultation call, it's either like, okay, I'm going to review your books, or I'm going to work up a proposal and send it over to you. Let's see, what is it? It's Tuesday. How does, tomorrow afternoon at 2 work to review everything? We're getting tiny commitments. Tiny commitments that, and the more commitments, the more yeses, you get from them, the more likely it is for them to say yes to the big thing. So I would highly encourage you to implement those things, talking about a range, being clear on whether or not, hey, if this proposal works for us, this range before I go create the proposal, and then finally scheduling that follow-up phone call.
Nice.
Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I can see how that would get them more motivated to move forward.
Big time. Just implementing those easy things will convert so many more. And feel free to take notes during this if you want to. This will be, it's being recorded. So, hey, you can always come back to it.
Yes.
But just implementing these things will go a long way. But what we're going to do and what we're going to talk about today will help prevent those things from ever happening, from them saying the price is too high or from ghosting you because you've had such a good conversation with them that like they genuinely want to work with you. They don't need to be sold. You've already had that conversation where now they want to work with you. So before we get into it, I think the best strategy here, instead of doing like a role play where you're the client and I'm the bookkeeper and we kind of do this, this thing, let's talk about some of the consultations you've had before and some of the conversations you've had, what the client has said, what you've said, and, I'll ask you some questions and then we'll come up with ways of handling that consultation that might be a little bit more productive or effective at really uncovering, what the prospect's problems are. So I think
Sure.
that's what we'll do. And so it won't be like a formal role play where we'll be, actors for, 15 minutes. We'll kind of break in and out of, of a role play scenario. So I made reference to, and before we get into it, I made reference to problems, finding out the problems that the client has. And this mindset is extremely important before you even go into these calls, is understanding that the goal of the call is not to sell your services. The goal of the call is not to find out how many bank accounts and credit card accounts this person has so that we can come up with a fee. It's none of those things. If we get to those things, great. But before we even know if the client needs those things, we need to walk into this with the primary goal being, what are the real problems this business owner is having in their business? Think about going to a doctor. I have somebody in my life that this happened to recently, but I think we've all had somebody in our lives that this has happened to, if not us, but we've had something wrong with us physically. We go see a doctor, we see multiple doctors, and nobody can figure out what's going on. And it's extremely frustrating. And then we go to a doctor who takes a lot of time to run a lot of tests and really listens to us. Some doctors, I think, they're like, they don't listen to us as much as we'd like them to, and they just are quick to prescribe a solution. And it's like, no, but there's like, this thing is real that I'm telling you. And so, like, this person in my life saw a bunch of doctors, ended up finding one that was able to accurately understand what it was, and it was something serious, and she's doing fine now, but it was something serious and something that these other doctors should have discovered, but they didn't ask enough questions, they didn't run enough tests. This doctor took the time to do that. She had a problem and she had these symptoms, and the symptoms, nobody took the time to understand the symptoms, ask the questions, and run the test to find the problem. And that's what this doctor who figured it out did. And if he hadn't done that, it would have been, been ugly. So that's what's happening on these calls here. When we talk to clients, there are patients, so to speak. They have problems, and we need to understand what those are. And so when we go into the call, understand that that's our goal. Let's find out what the problems are first before we can prescribe a solution. Okay. And then the second thing I'll point out just before we jump in is that the problems they tell us are, when we first ask what the problems are and the challenges are that they're having, are typically very general. I need a bookkeeper. That's not a problem. There's something else. There's a reason they need a bookkeeper. Okay. So we need to ask a lot of questions. And in order to ask good questions that help us get really good answers and specific answers, we need to listen. Okay. And so their responses are going to dictate what our questions are. That's how we're going to formulate our questions. It's very difficult to have a script for these things. We can have an outline, but I don't know what you're going to say. I don't know what you're going to say. There's an outline that, like, okay, we need to hit these kind of high points, but I don't know what you're going to say. And so I need to be a really, really good listener. And so we're going to go through that. And so let's just jump right into it. But those are two things that I want everybody to understand, is that goal is finding problems. And the way we do that is asking good questions. The way we ask good questions is listening. Okay, so let's get into one call. I know we talked a little bit before this, and you said you're going to kind of go back and jot down some and recall some situations with clients. Let's talk about one of the clients that you were on the phone with that you felt like, hey, things are going great here, and then it just didn't pan out. And let's talk a little bit about what that conversation looked like. So if you want to give us a little bit of background on the client, and then just tell us how the conversation went, we'll take it from there.
Sure. Yeah. So one that comes to mind that I felt was going to sign on with me, him and his wife have a business, and they do graphic design and among some other things. But basically, when we got on the call with him, because since I've been doing more calls lately, um, I've been changing up the way that I do them. So for this particular client, I, introduced myself, but I kind of gave him a talk at the beginning, like, oh, just I'll introduce myself. And I gave like why I like bookkeeping, what I'm passionate about it, and blah, blah, blah. And, then I said, okay, so you're wanting a bookkeeper, you know, what are you looking for? What do you need specifically? And so he was the kind of client that, he'd been in business for like 20 years, and he had come to the conclusion that he couldn't possibly grow his business without outsourcing his accounting. He hadn't been doing any books for 2022, and he was catching up his books with his tax preparer for the prior year. So he wasn't even doing the books. He was mixing his personal expenses into the business because of cash flow problems. And then his wife, like, they kind of have almost two separate businesses in one. Like, the wife does graphic design, but then he did like corporate gifting or something. And so having one bank account, like, she couldn't tell how much money she had coming in and how much he had for his side of things. So there was a lot going on with their business and with their bookkeeping potentially. Um, but he did mention to me, well, I've been talking to a lot of bookkeepers, and he called he called my introduction a pitch. I guess it was kind of a sales pitch, maybe. I didn't mean it for way, but he's like, I really liked your pitch. I've been looking for something like that, where it's not just like the numbers, where it's kind of elevated, and I need like processes, and I need help with a bunch of other things rather than just jotting down transactions. So he seemed to really like it. The thing, and once I thought about hindsight, that he said is, I'm looking for something affordable. And I didn't ask what that meant to him. Like, what does affordable mean? So he was actually very specific. I asked him in general about how many transactions a month. Like, I did that whole thing to try and, get enough information to get a quote to him. And he was very specific about, I can't like just do an average. I have to like give you very accurate numbers. So I said, okay, well, why don't you just email me? And if it's really that important to you. He's like, no, I want the quote to be like perfect. Or I don't want to tell you like way too, less than what I actually have. And then you're like, hey, why did this guy he was a personality. He was funny. I don't want you to like, undercharge and be like, hey, I actually had more transactions. So anyways, I had to follow up with him. But he sent me his transactions, and I put it in the pricing calculator, and I sent off the proposal. And the end of our call, he was like very excited. Yeah, like, this sounds really great. I never heard from him again. So that was one that really stuck out in my mind because he was so excited and then just disappeared.
Got it. Okay. So I think that's helpful. And I really like this format of going through calls, because these are real calls instead of, you playing some fake client, which is also can be beneficial as well. But okay. So what's interesting is he called your intro a pitch.
Yeah.
But I totally understand why he did that.
Yeah.
So let's go through it. So I took notes here, and I think there's a lot here to go on. Let me ask you this: what do you like, just based on your instinct? What do you feel like? What do you think he did? Do you think he's still struggling, or do you think he went with another bookkeeper? What's your impression? Just curious, since you were on the call.
My guess is he's probably doing calls because that's what it sounded like he was doing before he got on the phone with me. So my guess is he's, reaching out to other ones, trying to find affordable, whatever that means for him.
So you sent him a proposal.
Mm-hmm. Yep,
how much?
I did. Oh, good question. I want to say, because he had a lot of things going on, I think it was like $1,000, or put it at 900 or something like
900.
that. 900.
Okay.
Yeah.
And okay, so how much revenue did he have?
I think they were.
Did you ask how much revenue they had?
It was in the Calendly, so I just went off of that, so I didn't ask him.
Do you know approximately what that was?
I think they were like 200 to 300,000.
Okay, I mean let's call it 250K. So I'm glad you got that number. So it's good to quantify things as much as possible, and that's in my Calendly. So before someone books a call, it's industry, it's revenue, and so we don't price based off revenue, but it can be a good indicator. We when we're starting out, we're pricing based on like the quantity and complexity of the work to be done, like through a pricing calculator. If we want to do like value pricing, we can price based on the value we can try to create. But you don't have to do value pricing. It's just kind of a more advanced thing. You can never do it, or you can evolve to it eventually. But even if you're value pricing, if the revenue just isn't there, if this is a $50,000 a year business, but you're able to do some really incredible things and show them how you can grow their business, it's going to be hard to charge, $1,000 a month. So when we're pricing based off of quantity and complexity of the work, which is what we do with the pricing calculator, our fees will be loosely tied to revenue. Okay. So in this case, $250,000 a year. You said maybe $300,000, and we're talking about charging $9,000, or 9,000 or 900 a month. So, that would be totally reasonable when we're talking about just a numbers perspective. But he didn't get back to you, so he either saw that number and was blown away, or something else happened. Regardless, that connection wasn't made. He said he loved your pitch, but that connection just wasn't made. There was no real emotional connection. That's the only thing we can deduce here. It's the only thing we can deduce here. If we were able to conduct this conversation in a way that he felt like, okay, I'm going to be able to grow my business. I'm on the phone because he told you I can't grow my business without getting rid of this bookkeeping. We know he wants to do that. If we could make it clear that he could grow his business and how we could do that, and tried to quantify that, then he's buying money. He's buying money if we could really clearly do that. So that's what our goal should be here. And the only way to get him there and for him to believe it is for him to come to that conclusion on his own. And we ask the questions to keep scooting him further and further until it's like, oh, wow, you're right. It's like when you go to a therapist, if anybody's gone to like see a therapist out there, they ask a ton of questions. They don't tell you what your problems are. They ask a ton of questions to get you to come to that conclusion on your own. And so that's kind of what we want to do here. If we tell them, they hear it. If they come to the conclusion on their own based off the questions that we kind of just keep directing them to where we want them to be, they believe it if they can come to it on their own. So let's break down the call. I took a lot of notes here. You gave, in your introduction, you said you told them why you like bookkeeping and why you're passionate about bookkeeping. What's your reasoning behind doing that?
Well, and I don't do that anymore. But
Okay.
my reasoning behind it at the time was that the couple of calls I had before, I realized they didn't really know anything about me. Like by the end, I don't even know that they remembered my name. Like I had said it in the very beginning, but so it was something like I was more trying to convey that, how I help clients, meet their goals. And that's why I love it so much. But it was more like I felt like all my other calls were like, oh, hi, my name's Holly. I'm a bookkeeper you're scheduled a call with. I understand you need bookkeeping. What kind of things do you need? And I just go right into it. And so I was experimenting with like putting something else in the front to try and kind of make that connection. And then it came across as a sales pitch, I guess. But
yeah. And the reason I think that happened was, well, let me ask you why you think he perceived it as a sales pitch.
I mean, it really just, I suppose, had more to do with me and what I have to offer rather than what he was needing.
Yes, that's exactly it. So you hit it right on the head. And to your credit, you're not really handling calls like this anymore. So that's great. So we don't really need to spend too much time on it. Aside from the fact that, you said two things that were interesting. You said you didn't feel like, you had that connection with people. Like they didn't know who you are. Hi, I'm Holly. What do you want? So giving them a little bit of context and background. Two things. The first thing you need to remember is they don't care about you.
Right.
I think my clients love me. I think it makes me feel good, but they don't really love me. They love what I'm able to help them do in their business. At the end of the day, they are selfish. They want to grow their business, and not selfish in a bad way, but they care about their business. They don't care about you. Okay, they're already on the phone with you, which indicates that whatever they've seen in your marketing messaging or whatever that is speaks to them and has said, this is somebody who can solve my problem. Let me get on a phone. So at that point, they know everything they need to know at this point. It's all about them now. They just want to hear about themselves. So they don't care about you. You know, I know you, Holly. You're great. I think I'm great, but they don't. You know, when we find out that they don't necessarily care, that's the game changer, and that's the mindset we need to have. Furthermore, they will come to like you and know you and trust you through this conversation that you have, just by asking these questions and helping them think about their business and in ways that they've never thought about before. It's like when you go to a doctor and they ask you questions, and you know, a lot of people when they go to the doctor, you take off your shirt or whatever, and they actually put their hands on you. You know, I like that. It feels comforting to many people. It does. I'm sure some people that, they're not crazy about it, but it's somebody who's taking the time to get to know you, to care you, and through that process, they ask you a bunch of questions. You feel like you're cared for. And so that connection is going to be made just through the questions. So don't feel like, you don't do this anymore. But honestly, it's like, hey, glad to be on the phone with you, or thanks for booking a call. Looking forward to talking to you. Tell me a little bit about your business and what you need help with. And then boom, they're off running. So the sooner we can get to just the meat of the conversation and the questions, finding out their problems, that's how we make that emotional connection. Okay. So that's that. That's really, when I say there's a script, that's basically the only script we've got, the only line of the script, which is tell me a little bit about your business and what you're looking for help with. And then you just kind of let them go. So then you said, you did ask, what do you need specifically, which I like. I like that. I like that you even use the word specifically, because many times they will be very general. And so then he said that he realized that he couldn't grow doing his own books. He needed, he realized he couldn't grow unless he outsourced. Let's talk a little bit about that. When he said that, what was, where did things go? Not what you should have said, but what did you say? Because he said he couldn't grow doing his books, his own books. He wasn't even really doing his books because he was behind, and he was mixing personal and business due to cash flow. So when he said, I realize I can't grow unless I outsource, what was your response? If anything, or did he just continue talking?
I mean, he did talk a lot, which is good. But because he just had a lot of problems and he was kind of just like rattling them all off.
Yeah.
But
were you taking notes?
Yes, and I do with all
good.
my kids. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. I got my trusty pink notepad here.
Yes. So, and I have a little outline that I kind of, it's not like super solid. It just gives me some idea if I'm, in a lull or something, I can kind of look and get back on track. But basically, it was almost like he had come to this point of almost humility, because he was like, yeah, I'm getting older and I need to, I'm just realizing I can't do as much anymore. I can't do the books and try and grow. So I think I asked, like, well, what are your goals? Or maybe that was the question he was answering that I had. But because I usually try to ask them what their goals are. But but he was like, he's wanting to grow his revenue. I think he was wanting to hire 1 or 2 people.
Okay, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. Specifically, did you address the whole, like, I can't grow while doing bookkeeping? Did you really dive into that at all? Like, did we expand on it, I guess is the question.
I'm trying to think. I mean, typically, like, for something like that, I would say, well, that's definitely something that I can help with. Get things off your plate so that you have time to do what you love to do. And, I get to do what I love to do and take, the books off your plate. So that tends to be like my typical answer. And that's probably what I said.
That sounds pitchy.
Okay.
That sounds pitchy. We don't like this whole, like, we are not selling ourselves on this conversation at all. Again, the primary goal is, let's find out what the problems are. If we can solve those problems, we'll talk about that at the end of the call. But throwing those things out there, from a client's perspective, if we're asking questions and periodically it's like, yeah, I could absolutely help you with that. And here's why, and take that off your plate, and we kind of focus on that a little too much. It sounds a little it can come off as a little pushy. Okay, so it's more like just figuring out what the problems are and then diagnosing at the end of the call, if it makes sense. So I would encourage you to, whenever you feel that, ask a question, ask another question. Okay, always be wondering, what's the next best question to ask. And so when it comes to, he's saying he couldn't grow without outsourcing, there's a ton of gold in there that's unmined. That's a very general problem. Most bookkeepers would say, well, yeah, that's why having a bookkeeper is great. We can help, we can take care of that so you can grow. But this is still super general. We can find out so much more. And by asking probing questions, deeper questions to get more and more specific, we're that doctor that's running those tests and putting those, asking questions and touching you and, just figuring out what the real problems are and making that connection. So what do you feel like there's some questions that you could have asked when it comes to him saying, I can't grow unless I outsource my books? Is there anything that jumps out?
I'm like a terrible question asker. And I think
Okay.
that's why I'm struggling so much because, yeah, most of the time I have like my little outline and like those are the questions like I typically ask every time. And then that's kind of it. So
Well, you
like it's
have
terrible.
you've already gone through the first two steps. You've recognized that there's a problem, and you're on this live stream
Oh
addressing
crap,
that problem. How
everyone.
cool is that? How cool is that? So that's what we'll do. So I'll walk through some questions, and as you get into this, process, it'll start to become second nature. In fact, it's a superpower. You start to be able to do this, and you do this with every client, and it's just like they close every time. It really is a superpower. There's a really great book, and I've got it behind me somewhere. Where is it at? It's here. Socratic Selling. It's a really great book on how to ask, the right questions. So I just love that book. But let's talk about some questions that you could ask. So he said he couldn't grow unless he outsources the bookkeeping. So that brings up a couple of questions. What does it mean by what does he mean by growing? What does that mean? And so we asked that question. Okay, so when you talk about growing, what are some of your growth goals? Right? And so you may have gotten into that when you asked him what his goals were. You said his goal, he started talking later in the conversation about growing revenue, right?
Yeah.
Did we ask him to quantify that? Like, how much would he like to grow revenue and in what time frame?
I don't think so.
Okay. Another great probing question to get specific here. If he's at 250K and he says, yeah, I'd like to get to 500K in the next 2 years. Great. Now we've got a number. We've got he wants to add $250,000 in revenue. And as we start talking about like specific numbers, his ability to say, I want something cheap at the end of the call, like, because that starts to lose a lot of it, starts to crumble. Yeah, I want to add $250,000 in revenue. Oh, but I want something cheap. Like for the most part, business people, they see the disparity there, and people have a desire to be congruent. If they say something at the beginning of a conversation, they don't want to say something that contradicts that at the end of the conversation. So that's how powerful this is in getting them to like quantify things. So we've got a number there, 250K. He wants to grow to 500K. What are some of the some of the things that you've got planned to help you get there? Like, what are some of the ways? What are some of the things that you have planned to help you get there? I'm curious. That's a great question, right? Because it's going to help us understand, like, more about this problem? Is this a situation where he feels like he just needs to work harder? Does he just need to get more clients? Like, what does that look like? Are his finances? You've talked about his finances being a mess, but like, what part does that play in this? Does he have a plan? A lot of times you'll hear people say, "Well, I don't really know." Like, what's your plan to get from where you are now to where you want to be? I don't really know. Okay, well, that opens up this clear need for a partner. I don't really have a plan to get there. Um, 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 are you looking for someone to help you put together a plan to get there? He's going to say yes, right?
Yeah.
So you are, without pitching, you're getting him to start to commit little by little. Yeah, I don't have a plan. I'm looking for someone to help me put together a plan. So putting together a plan to help him get there starts to, even though it's just us doing basic bookkeeping, because he just, as you said, he doesn't have the information right now to make any decisions with his business.
Right.
So just basic bookkeeping is going to help him get there. Okay, so those are do you see that those are some really great questions that just come out of that one statement that he made, that general statement saying he couldn't grow unless he outsources his bookkeeping. Okay, what do you mean by growing? What's your plan? Are you looking for someone to help you with that plan? Okay, great. Another question that comes out of this, I mean, you can get a lot of questions out of this one item here.
Wow.
Okay, if you're not, and this kind of ties to what's your plan. If you're not doing the bookkeeping, because it sounds like you're doing, you're spending a lot of time on the books. You've been ignoring them lately, but when you are spending time on the books, how long is it taking you? Did we talk about that at all?
I think because he hadn't touched them, I wasn't sure how to like ask that.
Got
Because
it.
even some people, like, there was a cleanup I did where he hadn't ever done the books. So then a lot of times, like, sometimes I would ask just, you know, because it
Okay,
was on my paper, and they would say, "Well, but I don't spend time on the books," and I'd be like,
sure.
"Oh, okay."
This person though said he was doing the books
He
at one
hadn't
point.
touched 2022, but he was working with his accountant to do the 2021. So it was a lot of work in a short amount of time to get all
Got
the
it.
paperwork
Okay.
together.
Okay, great. So then if that specific question doesn't make sense, the question becomes, okay, so if you're not doing your books because you want to outsource them so that you can grow, what types of things will you be focusing on?
Mm.
What types of things in your business will you be focusing on? And what this helps us do is it helps them to start dreaming about this future life. Oh gosh, if I didn't have to do the books, I could finally focus on this marketing thing that I've been meaning to do, but I've been putting off because, well, A, I don't really want to do it, but B, like, I'm doing the books. Asking these questions really helps us to make this emotional connection. And without us telling them why we're the solution to this problem, just by asking the questions and caring enough to ask these questions, we're setting ourselves apart and establishing our authority. Do you feel that?
Yeah, definitely.
Great. And I mean, bookkeepers just aren't doing this. But he talked to other bookkeepers, they aren't doing this. Very few bookkeepers are just taking the time to ask questions. Most of the call should be you asking questions, being in this phase of the conversation. So people want to kind of rush through it and get to, okay, just tell me how many bank accounts you have so I can tell you how much it costs.
Yeah.
But this is where you close the deal, not at the end of the call. This is where you do it. Okay, so let's move on. So he's not doing his own books. Uh, I'd ask him questions when it comes to not doing his own books. Okay, so you're working on 2022. You don't have any books done yet. How are you sort of making decisions on how to grow your business without any data? What are you basing some of the decisions you're making on? Let's find out. Oh, I use my bank account. I look at my bank account. If there's money in there, it feels like I'm doing good. If there's not, it doesn't feel good. But most of the time, it's like, well, I don't use that information. I work harder. Okay, that goes back to this plan that we talked about creating. We're able to give them the information they need for them to make good decisions. But let's see what his plans are. Let's see what his plans are. He's mixing business and personal due to cash flow. That's kind of a gold mine there. What question do you feel like you might be able to ask when he says, when you find out that they're mixing business and personal because they're having cash flow issues?
Um, I don't know. Maybe, do you, yeah, I have no idea. This is why I'm
That's
so bad
totally
at
okay.
this.
That's totally okay. Whenever we're wanting what question to ask, it can be helpful to sort of restate what they told us in the form of a question, but our goal is for more specificity. It's always more specificity. Okay. So we're mixing personal funds and business funds because we're having cash flow issues. Okay. Tell me a little bit more about these cash flow issues.
Mm.
Can you give me a
So
couple
simple.
of, what's that?
So simple.
Pretty simple. It's pretty simple, but it'll come. It's a skill that will come, and that's why we're here. Can you give me a couple of examples of why you've had to use personal funds? Like what's happening in the business to cause that?
Mm.
Okay, let's understand that, and then their answers to those questions are going to create more questions for us to ask to get more and more specific. They might a restaurant might be like, well, we collect sales tax, but um, we're spending so much. Food costs have gone up that we collect the sales tax, and we're spending it on like food when we're really supposed to be escrowing that money to send to the state. So when it comes time to pay that sales tax, we don't have it. And so then we inject personal funds. Okay, well, what I'm hearing though, what I'm hearing you say is your food costs are a little bit out of control. Okay, what have we done to manage that?
Mm.
An example of how we can get really, really specific on these calls. From this person's perspective, if they've spoken to other bookkeepers, it's like, okay, I need a bookkeeper because I want to grow and I don't like doing the books. And the bookkeeper says, well, I'm a bookkeeper, so I can take care of that so you can grow. Let me ask you some questions about transactions and bank accounts so I can give you a number and we'll see if it works. That's what they're used to hearing. But when they're getting asked questions like, what specifically is causing your cash flow issues? Oh, you feel like it might be food costs, and what's been causing the rise in food costs? They're getting asked questions that are detailed that nobody else is taking the time to ask, which subconsciously makes them feel like, oh my gosh, this person's an expert. Like this person cares. Does that make
Yeah,
sense? I mean,
definitely.
nobody takes the time to answer these questions, but it's where the deal is won or lost because we're getting we're making that emotional connection much better than at the beginning of a call saying like I'm passionate about bookkeeping because of XYZ. Um, okay, mixing two businesses. When they talk about mixing two businesses, the graphic design business and the gifting business, lots of great opportunity there to determine, okay, what's, do we know how profitable one business is over the other?
Right. Yeah. And he doesn't. Yeah.
He doesn't. Okay. All
Mm.
right, great. Well, would that be of benefit to you? I mean, if you feel like your gifting business was just straight killing it and the graphic design business was lagging behind, does it make sense for your wife to come over and help you grow the gifting business? Or maybe we look at pricing. Maybe your wife on graphic design jobs, maybe there's some work we can do in terms of pricing. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah.
What are you getting from some of these questions that I'm coming up with? What's your reaction to some of these things?
I
Honest
think it's,
reaction.
yeah. I mean, I think it's really good because I'm kind of getting to know them more. And then, there's going to be even more problems that I'm going to unearth
Yeah.
that I can solve that I may not have known just from my kind of very surface level checking a box questions.
Yeah. I mean, I've been on calls where I've asked questions and it's gotten like, and not all calls will be like this, but some people will be more open than others where we've talked about the real problems in their business and they've talked about, I've, I, I feel like I'm just spinning my wheels and I'm working like crazy. I'm like I don't see my wife much. I miss all my kids' things because I'm constantly doing this. Like I've been talking to people and their voices have cracked, talking
Oh,
about how they miss, they don't have time with their kids. What kind of an emotional connection do you feel like is happening there? Like somebody
yes.
who's going to like, first of all, not all clients are that vulnerable, but that's okay. I'm here to like solve these problems that are causing all these really like ugly problems in your life. But because I've asked those questions, I've shown I care, and now they're like this. I mean, they are just like locked in. They finally feel like they found someone. They're heard. It's like you're done. You don't have to sell anything. $900 a month to them because they will pay whatever it takes to get out of this pain. But we have to get them to understand the real pain and the effect that this is having on them. So we do that with questions. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, okay. Talking to a lot of bookkeepers. Okay, great. Tell me a little bit about um, what you've heard that you like, and some of the things that you've heard that have caused you to continue talking to other bookkeepers.
Mm,
A
that's a
great
good one.
question that can help him sell himself on you. I didn't like that this person did this, or everybody's too expensive. Oh, okay. Well, tell me a little bit about. Let's talk about that. When you say too expensive, what are we talking here? Let's find that. If they talk about things they like, okay, great. These are things that we can store. Then we can then ask more questions about. Okay, and help us, kind of give us a leg up on that. So lots of great questions to be had there. Um, he let's see. Okay, and then you said he finally said, "I need something affordable," and you said you wish you would have asked what he meant by that. And I agree
Yes,
with you. I agree with you. That's
totally.
a great question. What will happen is that some people are just wired that way. They're wired just to look for the cheapest solution. Period. And when you have lots of leads coming in, like it's okay if you run into like somebody who's a real penny pincher. But what will happen is that as a result of asking questions that uncover like the real problems somebody's having in their business, and then asking what effect that's having, like, okay, like cash is tight. I'm constantly injecting personal funds into the business. You could take it a step further and say, um, what is your capacity to fund this business with personal funds in perpetuity? I mean, do we have just a big pot of, did you win the lottery? Are you totally okay? Or like, what kind of an effect is this having? I mean, is this money going to run out? Are we talking about, the end of the business here if we don't fix this problem? And if so, what does the end of the business mean? Does that mean you go back and get a job? These are questions that as you evolve, you can feel more comfortable asking. Because most people would be like, why would you ask them if they go get a job? Why are you asking, talking about their business them going out of business? Because what we try to do is we try to tie that to the result, like the problem. We ask questions to find out what the real problems are, and then what's the effect that has on this person, both their business and potentially personal. I've had people tell me, like, I don't know what I got twin daughters and they're going to college in 3 years, and I do not have the money to send them. I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, these are the types of things that, when we're able to ask questions, and if somebody's, willing to be open enough, we can get really deep with them. And once we've done that, you're done. You charge whatever you want. Not just to charge whatever we want, but we charge what's appropriate, and they don't have a problem with it. Do you understand that?
Totally. Hmm.
We're talking problems, then we're talking effect. Okay, what's that effect? So when you are thinking of good questions to ask, it's all about specificity. Let's take what they've said, let's just turn that around. Let's rephrase it, and and inject whatever language we need to get a little bit more specific. Tell me more about the types of cash flow issues you're having. Okay, and then what effect is that having? Okay, so do we just have an unlimited amount of personal money to put into this business? Like, what does that look like? Then we can start to understand the effects. No, in fact, like, I mean, we're draining our savings to try to fund this business. Okay, well, what happens when savings runs out? I guess I have to go back and get a job, which they don't want to do. They want to run their business. So we're getting really, really emotional here, and people buy based on emotion. Okay, that's something we've all heard. They buy based on emotion, and then they justify their purchase based on logic. Okay, and we will logically get them there. So asking if it's affordable, we talked about that already. Then you went into like number of transactions. He wanted to email you accurate numbers. Um, we talked a little bit earlier about like giving a range on the call. I would have put the kibosh on that right away. Let's ballpark it. Let's see if this even makes sense for either of us. I
Yeah.
do not want you to go create proposals that really don't make sense, even if they feel like, whoop, we we lost Holly. Maybe your internet went out, but Holly, if you're there, you can click that link I sent you, and you can jump back on. But I think I can finish this out, and then I can answer some questions. But feel free to jump back on, Holly. We don't want to create proposals unless they make sense, even if we feel like they make sense. Well, this conversation went really, really well. Like, I think I think this one's going to close. Let me just do this proposal. That's just not how, I mean, that's not how this one turned out. And in most cases, that's not how they turn out. Let's make sure we're on the same page before we go off and waste a bunch of time creating a proposal. Okay. So when this person said, oh, I don't want to give you estimates. I want to, I want you to give me an exact number. So let me give you exact numbers. Let's not waste time. Let's not do that. He had to email the specific numbers to Holly, which introduces friction. Okay, maybe he wasn't. Maybe maybe he could have dropped off at that point. We may have never heard from him. And so we want to put the kibosh on that. And it's like, let's ballpark this. Okay, let's ballpark this first. And I think that pretty much wraps it up. Let me hop over here and see if I can pull Holly back on to wrap this thing up. Let's see. All right, cool. She jumps back on. Great. Otherwise, I will take some questions here. But before I take questions, takeaways, questions. We need to stay in this phase of the conversation as long as possible, longer than we think. Okay. We need to ask questions that get them more and more and more specific. Okay. And so saying that they have cash flow issues is not, I mean, sure, that's a problem, but that's not a specific problem that will help us understand what the effect of that problem is. Okay. Tell me a little bit about some of these cash flow issues. What are some of the situations that have come up, some examples that have caused you to put personal funds into the business? Let's get specific here. Okay. And then like we talked about, a couple minutes ago, how long can we afford to be putting personal money into the business? Okay. Is this going to run out at some point? Is there, and what happens when that does happen? If they start to talk about, you're like, gosh, I have to close the business down, get a new job. They start to get into this mindset of, hey, I'll pay whatever this person wants to help me prevent that from happening. Okay. And again, by asking these questions, we are demonstrating our authority. Nobody else that this person is talking to cares enough to ask these questions and continue asking these questions. Only somebody who cares would ask this level of questions and getting this specific. So during the course of this conversation, we are getting ourselves and establishing ourselves as a higher and higher authority. You're back. You there, Holly? Oh, she's getting her audio issues back. Looks like you got to get your microphone issue resolved. Give me a thumbs up when you've got it resolved, and I'll bring it back on, and we'll wrap this thing up. So again, just by virtue of going through this process, we are subconsciously establishing ourselves as the authority. Okay, the absolute authority. And then when we get to the end and we talk about a fee, it makes sense. We don't have to say, we don't have to deal with these things that are like, why is it so expensive? Well, That's never going to happen because we've talked about how he doesn't have a plan in place. He wants a plan put in place to get him from 250 grand and add $250,000. Somebody who wants these large results is not going to be congruent. Everybody wants to be congruent. They don't want to contradict themselves. They have very little ground to stand on at the end of the day. If we're able to talk about all of these really important, like life or death problems that they're having with these big numbers attached to them, and then say, yeah, but I want it for real cheap. Okay. That just is so rare. All right. Holly, how's it look? You got your mic working? No, not yet. All right, thumbs down. Okay. Well, let me go through and scroll through the chat here, and I'll take some questions. If you do, Holly, just shoot me a message on Facebook on my other screen here, and I'll bring it back on. Emily, yeah, Holly did great and being brave and coming out here. The name of the book, the best, a really great book to learn how to ask really, really great questions is Socratic Selling by Kevin Daly. Socratic Selling. It's all about asking questions. S, you are asking, that would be an IRS problem. The sales tax, not being able to pay the sales tax. That's not an IRS problem. That's usually handled by the state. The sales tax is a state issue. And you're not supposed to, you're supposed to hold sales tax and then remit it to the state when it's due, monthly, quarterly, whatever the case. So if you're spending it and it's not there to pay sales tax when it comes time, then there's a problem there. So this person had to keep injecting personal funds into the business. And then John, you're saying another great book, The Power of Yes. It's a great book as well. It's lots of great books out there. So, Socratic Selling is one of my favorite. I will be on for just a couple more minutes. So if you have questions, feel free to type them into the chat. Otherwise, if you're watching the replay, same thing. You can still type questions into the chat or in the comments. I'll come back and answer those. I'll get a notification. So let me do one last check on Holly. Holly, you got your volume working?
I think so. Can you guys hear me now?
I hear you loud and clear. All right. Any question? Let's do a takeaway. Let's give me your thoughts.
Yeah, definitely. A lot that I can improve on for sure. Definitely work on my questions. Don't ask nearly enough questions. Talking less about how I can help solve their problems and finding out just more of the problems they have right now.
Yeah.
So definitely
specific problems.
Mm-hmm.
When in doubt, ask a question. Find a question. If you have to rephrase what they just said, rephrase what they said. In fact, there's another good book out there by Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference. And one of the tactics he uses, he was a former FBI hostage negotiator. Talk about having conversations that help you get what you want, right? Cash flow. I've got all these cash flow issues. He does this thing called mirroring, which is basically just repeating the last few words that the person said. And that opens up this conversation where it's like asking a question. We're just having so many, we have to inject personal money into the business all the time because we're having so many cash flow issues. Cash flow issues? And then that's a question. And then you can use that and that will open up, cash flow issues like the sales tax thing, and then they go off on that. That's something you can use, but just rephrasing what they've said in the form of a question, and just with the goal of getting more specific. You start to practice this. You can role play with your spouse, your kids. You can you practice asking good questions is what it is. If you've ever had young kids, it's like, hey, can I have some ice cream? No. Why? Well, because, you're about to go to bed and it's like you're going to be all jazzed up. Why? They're not asking great questions, but if you've ever been a parent, you try to be as logical as possible. And then you get to a point where you're like, because I said so. right? You realize that you're like they have they have gotten you to be more and more specific, and all they asked is why. And so that's really what we want to do here. So it can be as simple as that. Practice it in everyday conversation. It's like we do this all the time, at our kids' soccer game, and we meet somebody. It's like a conversation. What do you do? And they say, "Oh, I'm a media buyer." Oh, really? What does a media buyer do? We're asking a question to get more specific. Oh, I do. I run Facebook and Google ads for small business. Oh, really? Like, and then we ask another question about that because hey, I've never heard that. Like, what kind of small businesses do you work with? Oh, wow, bookkeepers. Wow, I pay. So this is something we naturally do, and we now just want to move this into the context of consultation. So continue to practice. Coaching calls, asking good questions and more specific questions in everyday life, things like that. You'll get better and better, and it will just become second nature. And then once you have that, now you have a superpower that basically just it's like a little money machine.
Awesome.
Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right, Holly, I appreciate you being willing to do this. We'll go ahead and wrap things up then.
Sounds good. Thanks, everybody.
All right, Holly, we'll talk to you real soon. Have a good one.
You too.
Okay, bye-bye. All right, cool. So let me just answer last couple questions here in the chat. Rizwan, you're saying, can you start without your profile picture posted? I don't know what that means. If you want to be more specific, you can get a little more specific. S, glad you enjoyed it. Very cool. And then we've got, let's see, what about this particular client? Can she go back now and just touch base with him to see where he is on choosing a bookkeeper, and then she can get deep with the questions? That's a great question. And yeah, depending on how long it's been, if you haven't heard from this person, I'd like to follow up with somebody two times, and then that's it. Okay. Hey, I didn't hear back. Just wanted to reach out and see where you are, see if there's any questions I can answer for you. And then one more time where I say, hey, I'm basically saying, like, I'm going to leave the ball in your court. Hey, you've got my info. If you need anything, let me know. And I like to make it very clear where I don't I'm going to go ahead and the ball's in your court, and like I'm going to leave it at that. And that, because I'm not going to continue to follow up. But yeah, you can absolutely do that. And if you have the opportunity to get on a phone call, then you can get deep with those questions. Absolutely. Jason, you are asking, does a company owe sales tax to the state where they're located, or every state they sell a product? And that's a complex question that gets into nexus. Do you have nexus in a particular state? So that's a little bit outside of the scope of this. But feel free to post that in your post that in the in the Facebook group, and we can get more specific on that. Let's see, Kevin. So on the first meeting, you just asked questions. What's the first steps for the next meeting? Well, the only time there'd be a next meeting is if we schedule that next meeting to review the proposal and the numbers. Okay. So if we send over a proposal with the numbers, and we've got that second meeting scheduled, then we onboard the client. Like they say, yeah, I've got no questions. Let's do this. And we just onboard the client. All right. Rizwan, you're asking, if I post a picture, your employer will know I'm working. Well, if you don't want them knowing that, or if you don't want to know, don't use LinkedIn. Use some. There's all kinds of marketing strategies that you can use that are very, very effective. Can I get your cell phone number? Respectfully, no. If you want to talk to me, I'm right here. All right. Or feel free to shoot me a Facebook message or an email. All right. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. All right. I hope you've enjoyed this. Hope you found this useful. If you'd like to do some of these in the future, you'd like to get on a call, a live, and do a live role play and stuff like that, love to have you. Reach out to me, shoot me a message on Facebook or something like that. But remember, let's ask questions, and let's keep asking tons and tons of questions on these calls. We'll close more deals, and we'll close them for higher fees. All right. So until next time. All right. Again, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Join my Facebook group for all kinds of great info, tips, and tricks on growing your business. And every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific, we go live on all three of those platforms, giving you everything you need to add 6 figures of revenue to your bookkeeping business. So until next week, have a great one. We'll talk to you soon.